Michigan-born Joel Bakan is a Rhodes Scholar, a Canadian professor, jazz guitarist, father, and persistent researcher who takes on corporations who don't behave. He is the author of The Corporation, a provocative book about the pathological pursuit of profit and power, and he's written a number of books on Canadian constitutional law. His newest work is called Childhood Under Siege, How Big Business Targets Children. He is currently teaching at UBC, and it is my pleasure to welcome Joel Bakan back to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Thanks for having me here. I'm grateful to be here. Yeah, I've just published this book, Childhood Under Siege. Came out about a month ago, I suppose. And I guess the thing that got me to write it is I have a couple of kids. And I was starting to see that their lives were being affected in some profound ways, not always positive. Mm-hmm. And I was interested in tracing back the source of that, and it turned out to be in the same place as the research revealed in my previous work, The Corporation.
And you suggest in the book our kids are being affected by a third force.
That's right, and that's how it feels. I mean, as a parent, you feel like there's this kind of insidious third force. And the thing, as I argued in my book and film, The Corporation, corporations are programmed to create wealth for shareholders. They're not programmed to care about what happens in the process of doing that. And so when they set their sights on kids, it's not a necessarily benevolent kind of focus that they have.
And they do set their sights, and they know how to do it, and who's vulnerable are children. Nelson Mandela said, and you quoted in the book, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children. Who should protect our kids?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. And needless to say, parents are the primary protectors and caregivers and all of that of kids. But parents don't parent in a vacuum. And I guess that's the working presumption in this book, is that we're parenting in conditions, and those conditions are increasingly making it difficult for us to make good decisions and the right decisions for our kids. And so that's what I'm interested in. A lot of people will say, isn't this all just parents' responsibility? And my response is, well, yes, of course it's parents' responsibility, but it's also our responsibility as a society to try to make their job easier so that they can protect the interests of their kids.
And no parent can watch a child 24/7.
Exactly.
You have a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old addicted to an extreme video game or a string of extreme video games. Where are they coming from? Who's making them?
No, exactly. And I mean, this is kind of what really committed me to writing this book, I guess, was this experience I had. I asked my then 11-year-old son, so what do you and your pals do when you're online? He said, wow, there's this really cool site, it's called addictinggames.com. And I thought, addicting games, I mean, they're not even, ashamed of it.
Right.
But then when I went to the site, I found these very strange games. And it's a site that's being aimed at 8-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And it's not in some dark corner of the web, that kids kind of accidentally or sneakily stumble upon. This is provided by Nickelodeon, a blue chip kids broadcaster. And I found their Whack Your Soulmate was one of the games. And what that involves is the child or young teen manipulates the mouse to get an apparently romantically involved couple to kill each other in increasingly brutal ways. And one of them, the woman elbows the man falls down, blood is gushing all over the place, and then she squats over him and defecates on him. Another one, she's defecating on him and punching him until he dies. And I'm just thinking, what's up with our culture? I mean, going back to Nelson Mandela's comment that the keenest revelation of society's soul is how it treats its children, I'm thinking there's something off here.
Of course, all the work we do to prevent domestic violence and to suggest it's not a good thing, but an 11-year-old can go online and watch it and I guess you win the game if you kill the wife. I'm not sure how that works.
Or the husband.
Or the husband.
And I suppose, you have to ask, well, why is this happening? And what I realized when interviewing the people who do this kind of stuff and interviewing kid marketers is they all said basically the same thing. And that is, our job is to go as deep as we can in pushing the hot emotional buttons of kids and teens, regardless of whether it's good for them or not. So if that means, that at virtual pet sites that we create attachments to virtual pets, and then we manipulate those attachments by saying your pet's going to die unless you buy more virtual food for it, with your parents' credit card, or if that means providing Whack Your Soulmate. It doesn't really matter, but the idea is to hit the emotional hot buttons in order to make money.
And we live in a society, as you know so well, of mad consumers. How are corporations or marketers or others turning our kids into mad consumers?
Well, I mean, obviously, from the perspective of a corporation that's involved in making things for kids, whether it's media or products, you want kids to be mad consumers. And when you look from 1960, I mean, before 1960, you didn't really have marketers targeting children directly. Why? Because there was no way to do it. I mean, you had comic books, but they're a relatively ineffective form. Once television is in the living room, you have a means for marketers to be able to get at kids, and that's when things really begin. 1960, kids' purchasing power, which is their own money plus their influence over their parents, and economists kind of work these things out, $5 billion. 1980, $50 billion. Today, $1 trillion. 1960, virtually no kid marketing industry. Today, $15 billion a year is spent on marketing to children. So clearly the efforts have increased, the amount of money has increased, and kids have become mad consumers. But they become mad consumers being effectively pushed and guided by marketers who are seeking new markets, and that's their job.
Sure, and they're very clever because you're nobody if you don't have a Hasbro toy or a Mattel doll or a special this or a special that, an iPad and an iPod.
Right.
But that's been going on for a long time in magazines or on television, on radio, and kids buy in that they don't get a Cabbage Patch doll for Christmas. It's the worst thing.
The worst thing. And
possibly
it's been
happen.
going on at least since the 1960s. But as I'm suggesting, it's increasing exponentially. And I guess the other thing that's important to note is that from a parent's perspective, it's no longer just the television set in the living room, but now it's the iPod, it's the smartphone. The kids are sort of outside of your monitoring and outside of your control, so you can't really deal with it. And when you look at the statistics, and the Kaiser Family Foundation just came out with a study, 8 to 10 hours a day on average are spent by kids engaged with commercial media. So, this is a large issue.
Sure.
That's twice the amount of time they spend in school.
Well, that's what the Kaiser report said.
Yeah, and they did a very sort of careful study of monitoring.
That our kids spend more time with electronic media than they do in school.
Yeah.
And when they're in school, what's happening? United States here, I know you compare the two in Childhood Under Siege. In the public school system, the corporatization, if you will, of public schools.
Right, which happens in two ways. I mean, one is that public schools have become another marketing platform. In the sense that when you go into many, and it depends on the district, some have restrictions and some don't, but in many districts in the United States and in Canada, you'll find, Coke machines in the hallway, you'll find banners advertising this and that, you'll find book covers on textbooks sponsored by different corporations, you'll find entire curriculum packages. One of them that I love is learning about the 4 food groups by analyzing a Big Mac, for example. So you'll find these corporate-sponsored curriculum packages. So that's one dimension of the problem. The second dimension, this is happening more in the United States than in Canada, is that corporations are beginning to be involved in running schools altogether, and in delivering the testing for schools and in creating the curricula for schools. So there's this, one of the guys I talked to, I interviewed, is involved in this new education industry. For Benno Schmidt, former president of Yale University, and now is in the private sector. And what he said to me is that education is the largest segment of the American economy behind healthcare. It's larger than cars, it's larger than military, it's huge. And the thing is that until quite recently, it was entirely within the public sphere and not accessible to corporations, but they are changing that quickly in the United States. And being in Canada, I think it's also it's often important for us to track what's going on down there.
Absolutely, but if tax dollars can't support public education, the educators reach out to corporations as they do in a sports arena.
Which
anything
makes,
like that.
Absolutely.
We have GM Place, we have Rogers Stadium,
Exactly. And I guess, you know, the difference is that educating kids is somewhat different than putting on a professional sports event. But you're absolutely right. The problem begins with the fact that schools aren't being properly funded. So they naturally reach out to corporate sponsors. And then that raises larger issues about, for example, the fact that the tax rate for corporations has been going down, you know, while consumers are being hit with the HST and the GST and the PSD, and all kinds of broader issues about how we're funding education. Are we funding it properly? And is it important to us to have a viable, robust public education system that doesn't have to go begging to corporations and running ads for them in order to fund it?
Right, and doesn't have to answer to corporations or to somebody who wants to put a machine in your school that dispenses junk food.
Exactly.
If you know what I mean. Obesity crisis, apparently. And our kids are not getting off the couch enough to get out into the playground. And by mere example, in our schools, we should be probably selling cabbage and tofu.
You would think. I mean, and a lot of school districts have taken this issue on and basically said, you know, we don't want pop vending machines in our hallways. It's sending the wrong message, and it's putting the wrong things into kids' bodies, and that's great. But I mean, it's obviously it's a very large issue. We're not going to make marketing to kids go away entirely. My aim in this book is, I guess, to say two things. One, to parents and to kids, let's look at the intentions behind this. Let's make sure that we're aware of it and therefore able to negotiate it and deal with it. And two, maybe there are some places where we should be bringing, you know, you asked about who should protect children. Maybe there are some places where we should be bringing back the idea that regulation is appropriate. Maybe we shouldn't just leave it to this or that school district to deal with whether there are pop machines in schools. Maybe this is a matter for public policy.
I know you're not against advertising. If somebody designs a product or a car or a new doll, obviously, free society, you can advertise the doll or the car.
Exactly. It's all about excess and balance in this book. It's all about trying to find a balance between what are the interests in the health and well-being of kids and what are the interests in having a market economy. And I mean, that's, you know, been our struggle as a society for the last 150 years. And my concern, and I express it in the book, is that we've gotten out of balance. We've leaned too heavily on just saying, do what you want to our kids to make a buck. We're not going to put any kind of restrictions or restraints in place. And I just think we need to bring that balance back.
Especially when it comes to over-medicating children. When we come back, we'll talk about big farmers, what's going on. I love the chapter you called Cheerleaders.
Pom-poms for pills.
Pom-poms for pills. We'll get to that. Joel Bakan, our guest, Childhood Under Siege, his new book.